strange. You'd think something as oppressive and creepy as a life absorber wouldn't be a pretty golden dome, but instead be all dark and creepy, like looking like the giant black head of the Kronos robot. Well, interesting that Bob looks so rejuvenated. Maybe he knows what's coming? Or is he trying to scare those who attacked his helpers? Nutan looked at his crew and said, "Well, my crew, no doubt this change in his beard color is proof that we disturbed the Prime Directive and interfered. No doubt that after the blue beam has beamed in the planet's energy into his head as he bows toward the absorber, it's going to attack the city Fuyu has been living in. And what will that make us? I've got to stop it before that happens, or I'm going to feel terribly responsible. Horribly responsible." Minutes later, Nutan beamed down into a desert. Out in the desert was a small town, but not the city Fuyu lived in. In the east of the city was Bob, bowed to the point where its head was touching the ground, with a blue light going into the cap on its head. There was now just minutes until the beam shut off and the giant vanished into the ground to come up and around Fuyu's city to incinerate it. Nutan reached into his pocket, lifted up the Alpha Capsule into the air, and pressed a button on it. Immediately, a ray shot down from Mutainia, making Nutan grow rapidly larger. When the minute was up, he, like Bob, stood 1,000 feet tall. Slosh! Nutan made a sound, shooting up into the sky. He was definitely Ultraman. Or, in this case, Ultramutant. Nutan came down out of the air and attacked Bob from behind. Bob, whose booty was still up in the air due to its prostration, got a strong, powerful kick, sending Bob's now slightly raised face plowing into the terrain of the planet before tumbling and rolling head over heels. Bob got up with a look of absolute fury in its eyes, but before it could respond, Nutan was on him, attacking with giant fists of fury. Bob looked dazed from the punches, but suddenly smashed Nutan on the side of the head, sending Nutan tumbling to the side, creating a very powerful Patamar quake. When Nutan stood up, he felt the ground give out from under his feet, and he fell into the giant hole that was created when Bob came out of it. Nutan crossed his wrist, made a yaw sound, and a ray shot out, striking Bob in the chest and blowing a big hole into it. Instead of blood, though, there was now a lot of dust and sand in the sky. Bob just smiled as the hole in his chest healed up, while the sand in the sky quickly vanished back into him, putting another shocked and stunned look on Nutan's face. Suddenly, Bob dissolved into a mountain of dust. Nutan looked about nervously in a karate stance. "Nutan, look out!" Sheena vainly shouted on Mutainia when a mountain quickly grew up behind the giant Nutan. Right when Nutan turned about, Bob grabbed Nutan and started bear-hugging him. Slosh! Nutan made, and the two went tumbling about on the planet's terrain. Nutan used all his might and went flipping to the side, sending Bob flying into the sky. But between Nutan and the mountain Bob was headed at, Bob suddenly turned into a mountain of dirt, and just added more mass to the mountain, kicking up tons of dust into the sky. Nutan, again in karate stance, looked about nervously. After a few minutes of getting ready for another bear hug, Nutan now knew that attack was probably never going to happen, so he shot up into the air, and headed toward Fuyu City, just in case Bob was going to attack it for Nutan's attack on the House of Ramada. Sure enough, there before his eyes was a tall, jagged mountain forming right on the outskirts of the city. It was building itself up at a slower pace than when it attacked Nutan, no doubt to help instill terror in the hearts of the city's inhabitants. The people began to scatter in horror, knowing what was about to befall them. Suddenly, right as Bob formed into the angry, scowling, 1,000-foot-tall giant that was expected, it got a swift kick in the side of the head as Ultramutant Nutan. knocked it flying to the side. When Bob got up, a look of shock was in its eyes as it got a lot of fast karate-like attacks from Ultra Mutant Nutan. Then the people in Fuyu City stopped running and started watching the fight that was taking place out on the outskirts, shaking the city each time one of the giants hit the ground. When Bob got up, Nutan jumped up, spun around, and kicked it in the face, knocking it flying and tumbling again. Nutan was trying to keep it from the city. When Bob got up, two swords had formed in its hands. It charged at Nutan. Nutan crossed his wrists and shot Bob with the ray again, blowing a big chunk of dust and matter out of Bob. Bob stopped as the wound healed up. But right when it was healed, Nutan staggered it to the face with a punch that was so loud and strong that it seemed to almost knock Bob out. Nutan then grabbed it by the beard, pulled it to the side, around and around, spinning Bob around and around and around by the beard, creating a huge hurricane wind. Nutan was planning on sending it out further away from the city, but suddenly a horrifying thing happened. The beard snapped in two. Nutan cringed with horror to realize that the beard really wasn't a beard, but only looked like one, in a kind of alienated generated effect. Instead of Bob flying out of the city, he was now flying into the city as sand that was once beard poured through Nutan's giant fingers. Nutan quickly and vainly flailed his arms in embarrassed ultra-mutant horror to see Bob tumbling, rolling, and crashing through skyscrapers. The crew on Mutainia gasped. But down on the planet, Nutan had no time to feel bad. When Bob staggered up, Nutan thought fast and leaped on its back and tried to pull off its head. Bob tried to slice Nutan with the swords, but the sharp point just missed where Nutan was. Suddenly, a loud siren sound began to go off. Bob tossed Nutan off with ease, sending Nutan rolling and taking out neighborhoods. When Nutan got up, his warning beacon on his helmet that materialized on his head was rapid. That materialized as he rapidly grew, started making a loud beeping humming sound. On Mutainia, the crew talked about how Ultra Mutant was now losing energy, and if Nutan didn't kill Bob soon, he'd be powerless and start to fail, never to rise again. Bob charged at Nutan with the swords. Nutan crossed his wrist again, but nothing came out. Instead, he got a slash across the chest, making Sheena cry out. Yellow mutated blood began to pour from Nutan's chest. Nutan tried to duck and dodge the blades, but his power was now rapidly fading, and he was getting cut and slashed more and more. Realizing that no more rays would be shooting out of his Ultra Mutant Man arms, Nutan instead concentrated on trying to avoid the swords, kicking and punching the giant as he dodged to the side. But he was so gangly and uncoordinated due to such a size that he was being cut more and more by the slashing swords of Bob. "We've got to get him out of there," shouted a crewman named Sergeant Storm, "or he'll be death by 1,000 cuts." "I've counted 39 already," said Callisto with concern. A minute more into the fight, and most of the city was destroyed. Nutan's warning blinker was sounding full speed. He was now incredibly goofy and awkward looking. He was now incredibly goofy and awkward looking, and Bob seemed stronger, albeit with a lot of gray in his beard now. Doug Davis, a crewman on Mutainia, pointed out that energy readings from the Golden Dome Absorber seemed to be diminishing in power. When he reported it to the Mutainia crew, Callisto said, "Yes, it seems logical that would happen, since it is the one that is creating this giant. But Nutan seems to be losing energy a lot faster than it is. The Mutainia crew vainly begged at the ship's viewing screen, telling Nutan to quit fighting Bob and instead try to escape before it